Today I'm going to be reading to you again from Charlotte's Web. We're going to be reading chapter 4, which is called Loneliness. And this chapter of the book is kind of a sad chapter. Wilbur has made really big plans for his day, and something comes in and kind of ruins his plans. And so we're going to read a little bit about what happens to Wilbur. As we're reading today, I want you to think about a few things. I want you to think about what are you noticing about Wilbur? What is something that he says or does, and what does that make you think about him as a character? I want you to be thinking about, was there ever a time for you when you made a plan for your day, you had a schedule laid out for your day, and things didn't go according to plan? And then lastly, the title of this chapter is called Loneliness. So I want you to see if you can listen to a detail of something that happens in this chapter that matches the title. So what's a detail you hear that makes you think of loneliness? So we'll get started. Chapter 4, Loneliness. The next day was rainy and dark. Rain fell on the roof of the barn and dripped steadily from the eaves. Rain fell in the barnyard and ran in crooked courses down into the lane where thistles and pigweed grew. Rain spattered against Mrs. Zuckerman's kitchen windows and came gushing out of the downspouts. Rain fell on the backs of the sheep as they grazed in the meadow. And when the sheep tired of standing in the rain, they walked slowly up the lane and into the field. Rain upset Wilbur's plans. Wilbur had planned to go out this day and dig a new hole in his yard. He had other plans too. His plans for the day went something like this. And I love this part because it reminds me of what we're doing in our writing journals right now. Breakfast at 6:30, skim milk, crusts, middlings, bits of donut, wheat cakes with drops of maple syrup sticking to them, potato skins, leftover custard pudding with raisins, and bits of shredded wheat. So you can see that what Wilbur gets to eat for breakfast is kind of like his parents' or his family's leftovers. Breakfast would be finished at 7. From 7 to 8, Wilbur planned to have a talk with Templeton, the rat that lived under his trough. Talking with Templeton was not the most interesting occupation in the world, but it was better than nothing. From 8 to 9, Wilbur planned to take a nap outdoors in the sun, and from 9 to 11, he planned to dig a hole or a trench and possibly find something good to eat buried in the dirt. From 11 to 12, he planned to stand still and watch flies on the boards, watch bees in the clover, and watch the swallows in the air. 12 o'clock, lunchtime, middlings, warm water, apple parings, meat gravy, carrot scrappings, meat scraps, stale hominy, and the wrapper off of a package of cheese. Lunch would be over at 1. From 1 to 2, Wilbur planned to sleep. From 2 to 3, he planned to scratch his itchy places by rubbing against the fence. From 3 to 4, he planned to stand perfectly still and think of what it was like to be alive and wait for Fern. At 4, supper would come. Skim milk, provender, leftover sandwich from Lurvy's lunchbox, prune skins, a morsel of this, a little bit of that, fried potatoes, marmalade drippings, and a little more of this and a little more of that, a piece of baked apple, and a scrap of upside-down cake. Oh, all those delicious things he gets to eat. Wilbur had gone to sleep thinking about these plans. He's had his whole day kind of laid out, didn't he? And he woke up at 6 and saw the rain, and it seemed as though he couldn't bear it. I get everything all beautifully planned out, and it has to go and rain, he said. For a while, he stood gloomily indoors. And then he walked to the door and looked out. Drops of rain stuck to his face. His yard was cold and wet. His trough had an inch of rainwater in it. Templeton was nowhere to be seen. "Are you out there, Templeton?" called Wilbur. There was no answer. Suddenly, Wilbur felt lonely and friendless. "One day just like another," he groaned. "I'm very young. I have no real friend here in the barn. It's going to rain all morning and all afternoon, and Fern won't come in such bad weather. Oh, honestly." And Wilbur was crying again for the second time in 2 days. Remember in the last chapter, that was when he got out of his pen and he got so overwhelmed. Now it's raining and he's overwhelmed again. What is this teaching us about Wilbur? Interesting. At 6:30, Wilbur heard the banging of a pail. Lurvy was standing outside in the rain, stirring up the pig's breakfast. "Come on, pig," said Lurvy. Wilbur did not budge. That means he didn't move, right? Lurvy dumped the slops, scraped the pail, and walked away. He noticed that something was wrong with the pig. Wilbur didn't want food. He wanted love. He wanted a friend, someone who would play with him. He mentioned this to the goose, who was sitting quietly in a corner of the sheepfold. "Will you come over and play with me?" he asked. "Sorry, Sonny, sorry," said the goose. "I'm sitting on my eggs. 8 of them. Gotta keep them toasty warm. Have to stay right here. No liberty-gibbet. I do not play when there are eggs to hatch. I'm expecting goslings." So the goose tells him, "I can't play with you. I've got to sit and wait for these eggs to hatch. I have to keep my eggs warm." She's got a responsibility to her eggs. Okay. "Well, I didn't think you were expecting woodpeckers," said Wilbur bitterly. Wilbur tried next one of the lambs. "Will you please play with me?" he asked. "Certainly not," said the lamb. "In the first place, I cannot get into your pen, as I'm not old enough to jump over the fence. And in the second place, I'm not interested in pigs. Pigs mean less than nothing to me." Listen to what Wilbur says. This is kind of strange. "What do you mean, less than nothing?" replied Wilbur. "I don't think there is any such thing that's less than nothing. Nothing is absolutely the limit of nothingness. It's the lowest you can go. It's the end of the line. How can something be less than nothing? If there were something that were less than nothing, then nothing would not be nothing. It would be a little something, even if it was just a very little bit of something. But if nothing really is nothing, then nothing has nothing that is less than it." "Be quiet," said the lamb. "Go play by yourself. I don't play with pigs." Sadly, Wilbur lay down and listened to the rain. Soon he saw the rat climbing down a slanting board that he used as a stairway. Here's the lamb who was talking to Wilbur. Okay, so here's Templeton. Do you guys think that Templeton's going to want to play with Wilbur? Let's see. "Will you play with me, Templeton?" asked Wilbur. "Play?" said Templeton, twirling his whiskers. "Play? I hardly know the meaning of the word play." "Well," said Wilbur, "it means to have fun, to frolic, to run and skip and make merry." "I never do those things if I can avoid them," replied the rat sourly. "I prefer to spend my time eating, gnawing, spying, and hiding. I'm a glutton, but not a merrymaker. Right now I'm on my way to your trough to eat your breakfast, since you haven't gotten enough sense to eat it yourself." And Templeton the rat crept stealthily along the wall. To do something stealthily means to do it kind of quietly and carefully so no one can notice you, right? So he's going stealthily along the wall and disappeared into a private tunnel that he had dug between the door and the trough in Wilbur's yard. Templeton was a crafty rat, and he had things pretty much his own way. The tunnel was an example of his skill and cunning. Cunning is the ability to get things done in a clever way, often by kind of lying to people or being sneaky, right? The tunnel enabled him to get from the barn to his hiding place under the pig trough without coming into the open. He had tunnels and runways all over Mr. Zuckerman's farm and could get from one place to another without being seen. Usually he slept during the daytime and was abroad only after dark. Wilbur watched him disappear into his tunnel. In a moment he saw the rat's sharp nose poke out from underneath the wooden trough. Cautiously, Templeton pulled himself up over the edge of the trough. This was almost more than Wilbur could stand on this dreary, rainy day to see his breakfast being eaten by somebody else. He knew Templeton was getting soaked out there in the pouring rain, but even that didn't comfort him. So he's having kind of a bad day again, isn't he, Wilbur? He has to watch some other animal eating his breakfast out there. Friendless, dejected, and hungry, he threw himself down into the manure and sobbed. Late that afternoon, Lurvy went to Mr. Zuckerman. "I think there's something wrong with that pig of yours. He hasn't touched his food." So the humans in the story are looking at Wilbur, right? They can't tell what he's thinking, but they're looking at him, the fact that he's not eating, and they're worried about him. I bet they're worried that he's sick, right? Because usually if somebody's not eating, that means they're sick. But Wilbur isn't sick, right? He's just feeling lonely. He's disappointed. He wanted to go out and have this fun day, and now he's not having it. So let's see what Mr. Zuckerman says. "Give him 2 spoonfuls of sulfur and a little molasses," said Mr. Zuckerman. So they're going to make him have medicine. Wilbur couldn't believe what was happening to him when Lurvy caught him and forced the medicine down his throat. This was certainly the worst day of his life. He didn't know whether he could endure the awful loneliness anymore. Endure means like to get through something. Darkness settled over everything. Soon there were only shadows and the noises of the sheep chewing their cuds, occasionally the rattle of a cow chain up overhead. You can imagine Wilbur's surprise when out of the darkness came a small voice he had never heard before. It sounded rather thin, but pleasant. "Do you want a friend, Wilbur?" it said. "I'll be a friend to you. I've watched you all day, and I like you." "But I can't see you," said Wilbur, jumping to his feet. "Where are you? And who are you?" "I'm right up here," said the voice. "Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning." Somebody's talking to Wilbur, and somebody wants to be his friend. I wonder who it is. I'm excited to read the next chapter with you next time. And I'll be posting some questions about this chapter to Seesaw, so make sure you look out for those.